Hello, everyone, and welcome to Weekend Recap for this week, Wednesday, the 5th of May, 2021. No midweek madness this week. This is just a delayed episode, unlike last week, which had 50% more weekend in it. Joining us, as always, is producer Sean. Sean, how are you this week?
I'm good, mate. There are no weekends anymore. There is only football, and there's games back on again tonight. So it's good that we're getting this episode back out there. Otherwise, because I was putting this run sheet together, and I was putting together the graphics and all that sort of stuff, and I'd forgotten that it was like in this match day that like the Mariners and Raw played each other and City and Newcastle and whatever else, because there's been so much football, which I'm not complaining about. But then at the same time, we've had weeks where we've had 4 games to talk about, but there's been 15 goals. And then this week we have like 8 games to talk about, and there's a bunch of 0-0 draws. So who knows how the content's actually going to come out, mate. But we'll unpack it together and we'll see how we go.
Yep. There's definitely that approach to take. I assume we're going to get through some games rather quickly, and other games, not going to mention anything specifically, Derby, might take us a little bit longer. Let's jump straight into it, and we'll go to the Mariners versus Raw. This one took place last Wednesday. A 4-0 rout of the Mariners on the Central Coast, as Brisbane roar with intent to close the gap on the top 6. Macaulay Gillespie, Joey Champness, Alex Parsons, and Masato Kudo all hitting the score sheet. Marco Urania getting a red card in the 62nd minute. First of all, Sean, what did you think of the red card?
Look, I thought I can see why it was given. I don't think it's a 3-game ban though, which I think means that the referees put it down as being like a more violent conduct than it actually was. Interestingly, throughout the course of the week, and you can maybe give the Sydney FC perspective on this, that they're going to go and try and get a lower suspension based on like his character history, which there is a precedent for because Ryan Grant did it, where
Yes.
he had a 3-game suspension where they kind of went in and said 250 games, it's his first red card, like he's not a dirty player, like it needs to be reduced, which I don't agree with. I think you should always judge the foul, not necessarily the person committing the foul, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't matter if you've had 100 red cards. If you go through somebody and then, like, it's a red card challenge, then it stays at the standard red card challenge for that particular punishment. I think once you go down that route, you open up a lot of different scenarios like this. So it'll be fascinating for me to see if Urania gets off. I thought, potentially in the build-up play in the live moment that it was red. And then once it went back to that replay, I was like, oh, you could kind of see that being given as like an orange, a yellow and a half almost, like a last warning one. But even then, like, I think Brisbane were very good in this game. And it kind of... The Central Coast is still good, and 4-0, I felt, was a very harsh result on the Central Coast because they were still trying to be the aggressors in the game, trying to do it. I think later on, as they started to tire a little bit, which they've had a long season, they play a pretty intense style. It's going to happen throughout the course of the year, plus the red card. They did start to leave too many gaps, and I think that's where Brisbane really started to kind of like press home their advantage. But we've slept on Brisbane a little bit. They are sneaking kind of back in. We last week were kind of talking about what teams do we run a line through as far as the final is concerned, and neither of us really rated Brisbane that highly to get back into the top 6. But they've got 3 games in hand on a bunch of teams now, and they could potentially catch them given that they're only a few points behind. So I think they're going to be a fascinating one to watch over the next few weeks.
Yeah, no, we weren't rating them highly, but we weren't prepared to write them off yet. We wanted to see how this week played out, and 4 points from 2 games is definitely a way to do that. I think that the Mariners are starting to fade a little bit. I still think they're going to make the 6, but, we go back, just about a month ago, and it was before this kind of like downswing started to hit, and we were going, oh, they're charging into the finals, home finals in Gosford, crowd's going to come back out, 15,000, all of this, and now it's like they're sputtering towards the finish line, and they may end up on the road for the finals, which is not where you would have had them at the about a month or 2 ago. I think Alan Stajic has to kind of like just reset the squad a little bit, just kind of like get everyone calmed back down. It's like, okay, we're not doing well. Take a day off, come back and try to get something from this, so that we can at least get a home final, even if it's not a top 2 and a week off. But I think that's maybe the approach that Stajic needs to take, and just especially with Urania suspended. I think that it was I think that he will get it reduced just simply based on the fact that there's a Ryan Grant precedent there. Otherwise, and we know soccer Twitter loves to do this, is the Sydney conspiracy. But if you ever wanted evidence of a Sydney conspiracy, like, this would be it. If you needed solid comparable evidence, like, the match review panel will just hand it to you if this isn't reduced.
Yeah, Twitter is going to be a shitstorm, and I'll absolutely be throwing some additional fuel onto that fire. Interestingly, and this is why I'll back Central Coast still to get into the top 6, they play Newcastle twice, and then they've got home games against... they've got away games against Brisbane, who I think they'll immediately want to kind of get a result back against. They've also got Melbourne City to travel to, which is a tough one. And then they've got Macarthur in Macarthur before hosting Western United to close out the season. So I think they can still get enough points out of those games. Let's say for their 6 remaining, they get 9 points. I think that would be sufficient for them to make the finals this season because it is so tight and because a 3-point gap really is, at the moment, a 2-game gap because you've kind of got to like work points back in and out. But I don't think we worry too much about the Central Coast falling down. They are still second in the league somehow because no one seems to want to try and catch Melbourne City despite City dropping points at various times. But yeah, like it will be very interesting, I think, over the next few weeks to see how that top 6 makeup actually comes through, and I don't think this will be the last that we talk about either the Mariners or the Raw in that build-up.
No, I don't think it will be either. Speaking of City extending their gap, let's move on to our next game. A Thursday night fixture here, Melbourne City against the Newcastle Jets. Goals to Andrew Naboo, Scott Jamieson, who saw that one coming, and Jamie McLaren give City their 3 goals. Steven Ugarkovic won very late, just before stoppage time, to get a consolation goal for the Jets. They've extended their gap towards the Premier's plate. We know that Arnie's going to come calling for, at the very least, Jamie McLaren. If not, Andrew Naboo, Roston Griffiths, those sorts of players. How many points do Melbourne City need to pick up over the next 3 weeks before Arnie comes calling to solidify the Premier's plate, in your opinion, as a City fan?
Yeah, we'll talk about this more when we talk about the Derby game because I think you and I will probably have conflicting opinions on certain things, but they're in a really tough run of fixtures from a travel perspective where they had the intensity of the derbies, which got them through. And I think once it's a derby and there's a big crowd and you're getting big results, it's very easy to kind of carry that wave of momentum. But then they travel to Macarthur and they're a little bit flat. I thought this game they were a little bit flat as well. And then they play again tonight against Perth and then again on Sunday against Brisbane. So they've got like a lot of football that's come for this team in the last kind of like 4 or 5 weeks. And I think if they get through this period, if they can pick up 3 points against Perth away tonight, if they can pick up points against Brisbane at home on Sunday, I think they're going to really like set themselves up to start preparing mentally at least for like that final series and those finals battles. They finish off the season with games against Adelaide, Wellington, Central Coast, and then Brisbane away. So like in those games, like the Central Coast one, the Wellington game potentially, and the Adelaide game, like that's really, I think, where they're going to start zoning in on maybe not necessarily a result, but start developing like how are we going to play in that final series, how we're going to take those grand final mentalities into the last few days, weeks, months of the season. There's still a lot of football to play, but we really do, I think, for each of the teams, and City in particular, as far as the like Premier's plate race is concerned, start looking comparatively about their runs home. It's not as good a run home as Central Coast is. I think they've got probably one of the better ones for the top 4 sides. Sydney FC have played a lot of tough games over the last few weeks. They've got a decent run home as well. So I think for City, they'll want to try and get to parity with those other clubs, that 20 games played piece, which they should be done by the time we meet up next week or the week after, 2 midweek fixtures coming up against Adelaide and Perth. Then if they've got that and they've got like a 9-point gap, I think they'll be happy, and I think they'll start kind of transitioning to thinking about their end of season scope going into those last couple of games of the season. But it's not all sunshine and roses. This game was tough for City. Like it was a tough one to break down. Naboo's early goal was heavily deflected. There was a sense of good fortune there, and then there was a period where City was well on top, but you just kind of felt that Newcastle maybe might snag something or nick something. Certainly in the stadium, that's how it felt to me anyway. Then Jameson with a fantastic goal kind of steadied the ship a little bit, and then they went 3-0 up. That was really like when the game died off. Went 3-0 up, but then just that little bit of brain fade, which has happened a couple of times now. It happened in the game against Sydney FC at Amy Park. It happened against Newcastle the first time we played them away. Just that little spark of complacency that I think is still there. And what we've learned is that Kisnorbo's a perfectionist. He will be trying to drill that sort of stuff out of the team so that they are relentless for that 90-minute period and really getting that focus back. So a lot of football to come. It wouldn't shock me if they lose or draw away in Perth tonight, or get done by Brisbane on the weekend, because they've played so much football and there is that fatigue portion. But I think they'll be relatively happy with where they sit at the moment and the fact that they've got games in hand on most of the chasing sides beneath them.
After this game against Perth, it's 4 straight at home before they travel to Brisbane. So it's Brisbane at home, Adelaide at home, Wellington at home, and Mariners at home. Really quick before we move on, how do you think the absence of Paddy Kisnorbo over the next couple of weeks is going to impact this side?
Yeah, the Copperoos thing. So for those of you that haven't read this story over on Twitter, there was a charity game between some ex-Socceroos and the Victoria Police at South Melbourne Stadium, Lakeside Stadium, during the course of the week. Paddy Kisnorbo was one of the ex-Socceroos. He tore his Achilles. He's now going to be, I think he gets surgery at some point this week. It might have already happened at time of recording, but he's not going to be on the sideline for 2 weeks while he's bedridden. This has happened once before. He did get food poisoning for an away trip. It might have been the Wellington game.
No, it was Wanderers.
It was Wanderers, thank you. And look, to be honest, the performance wasn't that different. I think we kind of comfortably got through that. So I think Kisnorbo will still be calling the shots, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's not on a Skype call or a Zoom call, such as his intensity level when he's watching these games. But I think Buckingham's proved himself as a capable manager both at the Knicks and now again here at City as well. So I don't think it'll change too much in terms of the week to week it will go. I don't think we expect to see much different in terms of the shape and the lineup and all that sort of stuff.
Yep. Fair enough. Let's move on to the Friday night fixture, which was Adelaide versus Western United. This one was scoreless in Adelaide, and yet it had all the drama of a 5-4 thriller. Victor Sanchez picking up a red card in the 36th minute for a second yellow, just 20 minutes after he got his first. Mohamed Toure also picked up a red card about 15 minutes after getting subbed on deep into second half stoppage time. Are Western United the best at parking the bus when they're down to 10? This is the second. I think it's the second week in a row they've had to do this, because they've copped a first half yellow card and they've just parked the bus and then tried to hit on the counter in the last 10 minutes. Probably should have had a goal in this one too. It was excellently worked by Alessandro Diamante to find, I think it was Dylan Piraeus? Yeah, it was Dylan Piraeus. And yet, and I don't want to get into it, get another VAR discussion, was ruled out by VAR by half an inch of an offside. So this game ends 0-0. But yeah, are Western United the best at parking the bus? In the A-League, I should say. I
think they are. Let me be clear. I think they are, but I think they do it with 11 men. I don't think it's necessarily even related to the 10-men thing, and I think that's why we've seen over the last few weeks they can make that transition to that quite easily, where they just drop their defensive line quite a bit. They play arguably one of the deeper defensive lines in the entire division and just try to be tough to break down. And there's times when they've gotten torn apart by it because they've kind of left too much of a gap in areas where they need to commit to the ball, or they've made it too easy for other opposition teams to read their forward movement and cut that off. Their width is their key, and that's why Piraeus and his connection with Diamante is so important. That's why I think Connor Payne has been, for me anyway, no one else seems to think so, but one of the best left backs in the division this season. So their shape and structure is very rigid. Make no mistake about it. It's probably the most rigid structure in the division, with the exception of one other team that we'll talk about in a moment. The portion for them that I think comes so easily is that they play with those two midfielders at the base. Usually Sanchez, Lustig's played in there at different positions and whatever else. And then they've still got three central defenders, and they can tuck those wing backs in to be regular fullbacks very quickly as well. So I think they can make adjustments on the fly that are exactly the same as their plan A, but effectively put 7 men behind the ball. And once you've got that ability, once you've got the pace of a Payne or a Piraeus, the quality on the ball of someone like Diamante to then find those runs and get them in behind, even though if you've got someone that's that good at playing a ball in behind and that good at waiting a pass, that you take the goalkeeper coming out of the equation, you can beat 2 or 3 people defensively with one pass if the off the ball run is good and the ball to find them is excellent. And I think that's where they've got the advantage. I don't think they lose that much going forward with 10 men, because really in most games, even when they've got 11, they don't commit that many men forward other than, either the front two, like Wales, Berisha, the two wing backs, and then, Diamanti has a free role to do whatever he wants. Guarachena kind of just chips in here or there if the second phase or the first phase hasn't worked out quite as well. So I think their plan A suits that. And then their plan B, when they go down to 10, is to just kind of like tuck everybody back in a little bit. And that's why they seize it up so well. If they get a lead in a final series match, they're going to be one of the harder teams to break down. As we've seen a couple of different times when they beat City, when they beat Adelaide, they are difficult to break down once they have something to work with and something to defend.
Yeah, as news yesterday as well that Dylan Piraeus has re-signed until the end of the 2022-23 season. So obviously, the club and the coach rate him incredibly highly, and he'll be a key part of Western United going forward, which is good. A nice, good youth attacking talent in the A-League is exactly what you want to see, who's, I don't want to say banging goals for fun because he's not exactly doing it at the moment, but he looks a danger score every time he's on the ball. Sorry, if Diamante stays around beyond this season as well, I can see those two continuing their dangerous link-up partnership, and that might lead to more scoring at will, particularly once things settle down next season and you see more players coming back into the A-League, and maybe they have some stability in regards to a stadium. Like if the new TV deal can sort things out the way things may, and there's that extra financial benefit to it, they may be able to afford to put money into, say, a Lakeside Stadium or something like that to get a good solid base right in the heart of Melbourne that's not Amy Park.
Yeah, Diamanti will be a fascinating one for them because I think he's only signing 1 year deals at a time, but so far is like enjoying it, and obviously lives in Chapel Street, South Yarra, so he's in a good spot and like he's living his best life with or without a TV cabinet. But I think he'll play as long as he wants to play. I think it's one of those scenarios where he'll tell them exactly when he wants to retire or when he wants to quit or whatever else. I think they've got a financial amount that they're both happy with. Yep. I think he's got a quality of life that he's quite happy with. He always speaks positively about his time in Australia, and I think genuinely does. He's like that Poibo kind of attitude. He seems to love life no matter where he is, but I think he is quite enjoying what he's got here. So I think he was only going to be on a 1 year deal originally and then signed a second season. It would shock me if he just keeps playing until he's 40 because he's a class above most of the other players in the division, unfortunately, which I don't know if that's a positive or a negative. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we go to our next game.
Yes, Perth versus MacArthur is next on the schedule. Fantastic work at both ends. Keeps this one scoreless by the keepers. I didn't see a whole lot in this game. I think Perth lacked, I don't want to say lacked the ability because Federici was good in goals, but neither team ever looked like scoring here, either Perth or MacArthur. We've already agreed over the last couple of weeks that we're essentially writing Perth glory off. MacArthur are in the position where some good early season form has still got them in that top half of the table, but I don't see any way that with MacArthur playing the way they are that continues, and with teams catching up games around them, picking up points, I don't see where MacArthur starts to pick up points if they don't fix something at the club. What do you think?
Look, I'm going to kind of echo the same thing we said last week. Like Perth have 3 games in hand on most other sides, but even if they win them, they're still not in the top 6. Whereas I think when we talk about games in hand, we're talking about scenarios where those clubs are looking to try and leapfrog different players to get themselves into that top 6 scenario, and then worrying about goal difference and head-to-head and all that other shit further down the track. So I think this was a big one. Perth needed to get 3 points if they really wanted to keep that realistic dream alive, because it would have seen them jump up above. Oh no, it wouldn't have seen them jump up above, but it would have seen them stick within 1 game of Wellington Phoenix. At the moment, they've got 3 games in hand, but are effectively 9 points outside the top 6 spots. That's if they get a very large goal difference swing. I think that's too much for them. I just don't think they have the run home to go through that sort of stuff. They've got City tonight, which will tell a huge part about their season. If they lose that, I think their season's done and dusted. Then they've got Melbourne Victory, Western United, who are in great form, Western Sydney, who are a bit up and down, and then Adelaide at home, which I think is a tough contest. MacArthur again at home, Wellington Phoenix, and the Jets to close out the season. So there's points there that can be gotten, but they need to become a side that can beat regularly top 2, top 4 teams. They have to get points against those sides, not just the teams around them in the division, if they really want to have a realistic chance of jumping back up towards the top of the league. They're not going to do it. For Macarthur, on the opposite sides of it, I thought this was one of their worst performances of the season. I don't think they created a lot other than potentially throwing a long ball towards Lachie Wales or Michael Roosh or whoever else. I thought Derbyshire was well and truly dealt with by Perth's defence. This was just Perth couldn't score. And they had a bunch of possession. They had a bunch of high quality, I think, delivery into the box. I'm a huge fan of Kasuke Ota at left back. I think he's been excellent for them this season, a very astute signing, and Garea was excellent on the other side as well. But once you kind of start to figure out what does Perth Glory do, they commit 4 men forward very early in transition. If you can limit Castro's supply and scenarios in that final, not that period, that kind of between 2/3, that middle third and that final third, those half spaces in that area, that's where he does damage. That's where he starts to cut inside, go around outside, and he is still at nearly 40, one of the best players in the division, which again, similar to Diamanti, I'm not sure if that's a compliment or a downside for Perth, but MacArthur had them figured out, and there wasn't really anything up Perth's sleeve, I thought, that was like a plan B or a plan C or a different route to goal that we hadn't already spoken about. They were happy to get it wide. They were happy to bang crosses into the box. I don't think they won a header inside their own area at any point throughout the match. I don't think they put a header out for a goal kick or a deflected one for a corner or anything like that. I think the defensive line for MacArthur, with Milligan in there, I thought had an excellent game as well. They really dealt with everything that Perth threw at them. And there weren't many gilt-edged chances, I thought, that came through that really showed that either team was going to win. So huge, dropped 2 points for Perth. MacArthur will also now start, I think, looking at how they're going to play the game away from home and potentially feel validated by this performance, even though I thought on another day or to another team, they probably would have lost by 2 or 3 goals.
Yeah, if you take out the class of Federici as a keeper, you can very easily see them conceding a ton here, and that may be an issue that MacArthur have to deal with towards the end of the season if Federici is the third keeper selected for Graham Arnold's squad. Given that we have absolutely no idea what Arnold's going to do there, you've got Federici, you've got Jamie Young, you've got Andrew Redmayne, all of whom could make a case to being that third keeper. That would have a great impact on the league if any of them were to leave. MacArthur's next 2 games are both against Victory. First one down in Melbourne, and then return to at Campbelltown a week later. Do MacArthur need to go 6 from 6 in those 2 games to kind of just, I guess, reset everything?
They've got no wins in 6, so they need a win. I think they just need to worry about that first one. And there's no better side, really, maybe Newcastle, but there's no better side than Victory to play to try and get back to winning form as things currently stand. And even then, Victory's performance have actually improved a little bit since the Brebner sacking, since they had Steve Keane come in. So they're kind of picking themselves back up again as well. I don't think they have to go 6 from 6. I think that's probably excessive, but I think they need to. The best teams that go into this final series are the ones that put together runs of form at the right period. So I think all of those teams kind of sitting between 31 points and 26 points, they really need to try and get 3 or 4 wins to close out their final 6 games of the season. Yep. More on that to come when we talk about one of our next teams.
Yeah, so when I said 6 from 6, I meant 6 points from 6 points out of the 2
apologies.
games. That was I worded that one poorly. Yes, I'd like to say that going up against Victory would be good, and I wrote a team off last week that we'll talk about in just a few minutes' time after a loss to the Victory, and then I was forced to eat my words. But we have one more game to talk about first before we get to that. That is Brisbane versus Wellington. A waterlogged Redcliffe resulted in a second scoreless draw on Saturday as neither side could overcome the conditions. Yellows to both Cam Devlin and Louis Fenton will see them miss Wellington's next game due to yellow card accumulation. Having a look at the conditions of this game, I think this game should... I know the league can't afford to at this point, but I think this game should have been postponed again. I think we've seen games postponed for conditions that weren't as bad as this, and those both took place in Sydney. We've seen a Sydney derby postponed, and we've seen a Big Blue postponed over the last couple of years on pitches that did not look as bad as this pitch looked on Saturday afternoon. As I said, I know the league's running out of time to cram all these fixtures in, but this did not produce any good football at all.
No, and it was impossible for both teams. You can't even really blame Brisbane and Wellington for the I don't want to say lack of. No, you know what I will say? Lack of quality in this match, because the pitch was effectively everywhere. Like, there's sometimes you have pitches where like there's bad areas. There was a game between, I want to say, Central Coast and Perth earlier this season where it was a very heavily waterlogged pitch.
It was a 2-2 draw on a Sunday afternoon that was delayed by half an hour.
But it was like very much in certain areas. The entirety of this pitch was covered. I wonder if the difference between this and the delays we saw for Sydney early in the season was due to the lightning portion. I wonder if that's like the key differentiator. Is lightning a risk or is lightning not a risk? But yeah, I think if there was a scenario where Brisbane wasn't already 3 games behind everybody else, then this game doesn't go ahead. But it wasn't at it was at Moreton Daly Stadium. Is that the Redcliffe? I thought it was a different venue.
So it's also known as Dolphin Stadium.
Right.
I think Moreton Daly is the sponsor for it.
Yep, gotcha. All right, yeah, so that does make a little bit more sense, I guess. They do have more games coming there as well. Brisbane will be playing the most football, them and Perth playing the most football between now and the end of the season with the most games in hand. But I think they would look back at the 4-0 victory against Central Coast and a point against Wellington, who are close to them. They are the team directly behind them in the table, albeit having played a few extra games. And I think they'd be relatively happy with that 4 points to kind of steady the ship a little bit for them. Immediately, if you look at and we'll look at it when we get to the ladder, their last 5 games, they've now like not lost in their last 5 and they've won 3 of the last 5, which has kind of come out of nowhere. I don't think you or I were really paying that much attention to their run of form based on how they'd been prior to that period. But if they can kind of continue that, if they can turn, Underwater World or Wet and Wild or whatever we're going to call it there in Redcliffe into like a home base where they do play, I think, half of their remaining games at that location, then, they could cause teams a few issues, and I think they could sneak into the top 6. Are they the most impressive side? Are they a top 6 side in terms of how much I rate their team or how like unlikely I'd be to want to try and play them in a final series? Not really. I think they are a little bit one-dimensional, but young manager is definitely getting the best out of the playing group that he's got. They had a bunch of first-time scorers on the weekend as well in that Central Coast game. I think they'll be happier than Wellington will be. For Wellington, they're starting to get like, maybe we don't put a line through them yet, but there's certainly like, a question mark or a pencil line through it that we might go back over in pen, just because they're running out of time. 6 games to go in their season. I don't think they've got the greatest run home at the moment either. The big thing that I think is going to be huge for them are the 2 games that they're now going to get to play in New Zealand. Those are looking like it will be Perth Glory at Eden Park, which I think was always one that they were likely to go and win, but then Western United at Sky Stadium is absolutely massive. So that's in a couple of weeks, and that's really, I think, going to make or break their season. They've got Melbourne City during that period as well, which is going to be a tough one for them. They've got a game against Western Sydney away. We don't know really what the story is with Western Sydney at the moment, but they've also got Adelaide this Friday. So they're potentially next week, we're probably going to talk about them a little bit further and really have to kind of make a decision as to whether they're going to make the finals or not. If they get through Adelaide and City with like a point and they can get themselves to New Zealand and really try and get 6 points in those games, potentially they'll make it in, but like they're running out of time.
Yes, they are. I'm going to back them into the 6, as I stubbornly predicted a couple of months back, and we're going to stick to that prediction. We've got 20 seconds left on this game, so very quickly, Dylan Wenzel-Halls, does Arnold select him, yes or no?
For the Olyroos or the Socceroos?
For the Socceroos.
No, God, no. Get Kowal. No, get Kowal in there. Get one of the Toures in there. Like he's not Socceroo level. He's a Olyroos discussion though.
Yeah, no, fair enough. That's all good. I just wanted to get that out of the way real quick. Scott McDonald also has left Brisbane to go to the side that we're going to talk about next. The Sydney Derby, Western Sydney, up against rivals Sydney FC. Derby dominance from the Wanderers sees them edge closer to the finals after I mistakenly put a line through them last week. Luke Bratton will miss Sydney FC's next game due to yellow card accumulation. Bruce Kamau in the 12th, Mitch Duke in the 16th, Scott McDonald in the 74th on debut for the Wanderers, providing Western Sydney's goals. Alex Wilkinson in the 47th from a corner heads home his 2nd of the season for just his 4th goal in the A-League. Bobo missed a penalty in the 88th minute before scoring Sydney's 2nd deep into stoppage time, but it was not enough for Sydney. I'm going to go first on this one, Sean, because I've got a lot to say. So 74% possession in total for Sydney FC. If you ever wanted a blueprint from the Wanderers on how to counter-attack, then this is it. For the Kamau and Duke goals, I thought that Sydney FC looked slow, lethargic, and they looked lost. And I don't know how much of that you put down to 3 games in 7 days, or how much you put to the extensive amount of playing time that certain players have had under Corica this season and in the last week. You know, when Babot missed that penalty, he looked every bit of a 36-year-old player who at the time of the penalty had played 250 minutes of football in 7 days. The only rest he had until that point was when he got replaced against the Mariners by Patrick Wood in the 88th minute, and against Victory, replaced in the 81st minute by Ivanovic. So I'll bring you in here for a second. Is that too much football for a 36-year-old to be playing in the space of a week, given how key Babot is to their side at the moment?
Look, no, because here's the comparison I would put. Does he look 36? Does he move like a 36-year-old? Maybe for... Actually, you know what? I take that back. Maybe Babot's a bad example because he's never been like a pacey player. You know, like he's always kind of been a bit more languid, a bit more of a hold-up guy, or a like proper, 6-foot poacher that can knock home header chances, or with the left foot, with the right foot in and around the 6-yard box. That's his game. I don't think he's really slowed down all that much because I don't think he was that quick to begin with. Whereas I would say Ninkovic has managed quite effectively, where he has had games where... Sorry, I've got the hiccups now randomly. He has had games where he's been rested, been used off the bench, and still for me looks the best player in Sydney FC's squad, which we've spoken about it with Western United, we've spoken about it with Perth Glory, like these succession plans about how they're going to kind of like adjust away from some of these older established stars is starting, I think, to become a real issue and concern. For Sydney FC, and this is where I'll defend them, and this is weird that I'm having to have this conversation with you, but like they played Central Coast in a very high intensity fixture. They played Adelaide in a very high intensity fixture. I thought they were good in both, draws in both games, but I think those matches took a lot out of them. And then they go immediately into a derby where I thought Western Sydney's 15 minutes was good, and then their 75 subsequent to that was poor. And the question I'll pose to you is, if Babot scores that penalty, are you happy with 3-3?
Yes, I'm absolutely happy with 3-3.
Yeah,
because of the way the game played out, I would absolutely have been happy with 3-3, even though it's not a win. And Wanderers fans love sticking that 864 days or whatever it is all over Twitter. I think you have to take a draw, given how quickly the Wanderers marked themselves in this fixture early on.
Yeah,
a couple of...
Well, we're going to go over time, so don't stress. Don't worry about the clock. The portion... I think if you look at the first 15 minutes, where in reality the Wanderers just came out and just went after it, which they haven't really done at any point this season. I think Duke's goal, I'd agree with your portion about it being a little bit slow. I think Bruce Kamau's goal was an excellent finish. I don't think there's many defences that would have dealt with the quality of the cutback ball and the pace on it, and then the first time finish clipping off the inside of the post. Like City would have conceded that goal 100%, and our defensive structure has been very good this season. I think a lot of the sides in this division would have conceded that goal. So credit to them for the quality, and I think Bruce Kamau's like in a great run of form. I want to say he scored like in his last 4 games or something. So I think kind of shit like that's going to happen throughout the course of a season, where you can see the quality finish. And even Scott McDonald's goal with his first touch as a Western Sydney Wanderer, I think that happens as you stretch and start to try and chase games and you start to try and make adjustments. The portion that I would be frustrated with from a Sydney FC fan is the Corica aspect, where I think, again, chasing a game too late to pull the trigger, and you run out of minutes. Like there's only...
I've got a lot to say on that as we continue on with this.
Yeah, so I'll close off and then I'll hand it back to you. I'll go on mute for a little bit and you can get everything off your chest. But I think there's only so much you can do. Like sometimes you need to give a player 30 minutes if they want to make an impact, and you have to give them 15 minutes to get up to pace with the game, get their touch back in, and then that last 15 minutes when they've got fresh legs on their opposition, that's when they really start to like kind of turn the game on its head and really make decisions. I thought it was a fascinating battle because Robinson's been poor, but I thought his game management was good, where he made the right subs at the right time to either steady Western Sydney, particularly after the Wilkinson goal. I thought he made the right decision to bring McDonald on at the time in which he did, because it led to that goal and it led to like kind of... he was surrounded by fast players looking to make runs in behind, and it created enough space for McDonald to get that finish, and really that goal was the sealer, and then, you know, closed out the game. On the opposite side of it, I thought Corica left all of his substitutions way too late to really chase the match and make changes and like deal with some of the threats that Western Sydney were providing on the counter, and then at the same time also give something different, a different dynamic going forward to whatever was going on. Having said that, Western Sydney fans, don't get carried away. You nearly still lost this game despite it being your best performance in 6 weeks, and Sydney FC fans, like, yeah, I'll let you go first, but like, you know, this isn't the end of the world, all right? Like, you guys have had a tough run of fixtures. You've come through, though, not with wins, but certainly decent performances throughout the course of that period. And the run home, I think, for Sydney FC is another very excellent run as well. They've got Newcastle on Saturday. They've got Western United, Melbourne Victory, Western Sydney again to come in 2.5 weeks, so you don't have to wait that long to try and get that win back. And then finish off the season with away games for Adelaide and Brisbane. I have a feeling they're probably likely going to win their next 4 matches and then really set themselves up similar to Melbourne City to start looking at final structures and finals assembly against those games against Adelaide United and Brisbane Roar and whoever else. ACL qualification, top 2 finish is still what Sydney will be aiming for, and I think they'll be looking at their last 6 games and looking and saying this is definitely still achievable for us. So not panic stations yet for Sydney FC, but hopefully they'll get a good performance against Newcastle and really, you know, start to build up that momentum heading to the final series, which is what they do every year, Stephen. They're usually shit for the first 15 rounds or so, and then they're great at the end of the season, and they win by, Ryan Grant's left nipple in the final day of the year, even though City were fantastic in lockdown. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to go through, but I'll hand it over to you. You can have your little Corica rant.
I've got 2 things I want to run by you first before I do that. 2 instances in this game that I think need further attention. The 38th minute, Ziggy Gordon in the box runs into Bobo. I don't think Bobo was going to get to the ball, and we'll talk about this more as we get to our next game with Rudy Gestede. But Bobo was blocked off the ball by Ziggy Gordon, who I felt changed his line to go into the path of Bobo. So, given that Bobo's missed penalty was for the same thing by Bahaja, or Bahaja was impacted by a player running off the ball, how is this instance also not a penalty?
You have to remind me, was it from a corner or something?
No, I think this was a cross into the box. I could be wrong. Yeah,
look, to be completely transparent, I don't 100% remember it, but it wouldn't shock me if Bobo kind of like felt the contact and then went down under it. He does tend to do that. Like, he wants to like get that free run at the ball and that free header. We saw a similar goal in the victory game where Gestede had a goal ruled out because he ran effectively through the player. And unfortunately, that's not how it works. Like, if you've got the behind position, you have to deal with jumping from the behind position. The player's not got any responsibility to get out of your way so that you can play at the ball. But I think that's always the differential. Like, if you're preventing the defender or the striker, either way, either player doesn't have to move out of the way so the other one can run in that possession. If they're stood in a singular spot or they're moving at a particular angle to like make clearance or whatever else, there is no preference to say that the attacker gets first right of passage or gets the first opportunity to try and meet that possession and meet that ball. We have seen a couple of weird penalties given throughout the course of this season where I felt it went the other way, where the defender was basically just standing their ground and the strikers made the most of the contact or whatever else, and it has happened a couple of different times. But similar lines to that Gestede one, like, I felt personally that goal was ruled out correctly, and not really remembering this particular scenario, I'll give benefit of the doubt to the referees and we'll let history stay as it is.
No, fair enough. Second instance, in the 60th minute, how has Troisi escaped a red for violent conduct here? I think the only thing that works in Troisi's favour is the fact he didn't directly look to see if there was a player behind him, but you could tell by the way he's positioned himself that he knows there's a player behind him somewhere, doesn't know which player it is, tall player, short player, but he swings the elbow out and hits Rattray in the face. How has he escaped a red card for violent conduct here? He only got a yellow on the pitch, and VAR did not suggest that Sean Evans come and have a look at it.
I think it's because, and I'm only speculating because they haven't really, like, as always, when there's controversial decisions that they haven't quite got right, they never release the audio for those. But I would assume that the referee has seen the incident and deemed it accidental contact. So then VAR can't intervene. It's only if he misses the incident in its entirety and they can say that his mistake was... Like, this is the murky thing about the language relating to VAR and the clear and obvious error, in air quotes. And I think that's like what happens to challenge. I don't think Shaun Evans is having the greatest season as a referee. I think he's still a better ref than Chris Beath, but more on that to come. The challenge that comes with that is their interpretation of what have I seen in that incident? How do I then refer that? And we spoke about this a couple of weeks when it was relating to VAR, where if there's a scenario and situation where the referee's made a call, that referee should have the capacity to then go and have a look at that slow motion replay and make that decision on their own accord. They shouldn't have to wait for VAR to call them. They should have capacity to say, I'd like to have another look at that on the video, please. And then they can go and have a look at it. In slow motion, everything looks worse. We know that. Yeah. I don't think... it would have been a harsh red, but certainly I think the contact warranted a free kick and given it to Retray and whatever else. I do think it was accidental contact because I don't think there was like... It was a broad movement, but sometimes when you're trying to protect the ball and you know that there's players coming in or whatever else, you just try and make your body as big as possible. It's not necessarily about leading with an elbow or leading with an arm or anything like that. And even though I'm not a big fan of Tracy, to me it looked like he was trying to make himself big to protect the ball, and it's just unfortunate that's where the contact happened. If it was more of like a deliberately violent movement with the point of an elbow, that's when I think you start getting into conversations about violent conduct. But sometimes you've got to try and read and interpret in those scenarios and situations what's the intention of the player. Is it to commit a foul and cause injury, or is it to commit violent contact, or is it to maintain possession? And the reason that I'll give Tracy the benefit of the doubt is I think it was designed behind maintaining possession, but again, I think it was poorly officiated. So you can resolve some of these issues and do it differently by letting that particular thing run and then asking VAR, do I need to go back and have a look at that? Instead, referees' natural instinct is to still call that foul and still deal with the scenario where, in reality, if they were using that technology or had capacity to access that technology different, maybe we are having a different conversation about Western Sydney being down to 10 men.
Yep, no, fair enough. I just wanted an outside opinion on it because, as we all know, I have a horse in this race, and this game is very close to my heart. So I'm going to talk about Corica for a little bit here. I think Corica has to win silverware this season. Otherwise, I think Sydney might need to start looking at something else here. Again, Corica has not used the bench as effectively as he probably should have. By the time Corica's made his first sub in and around the 75th minute, Carl Robinson's already made 4. He's brought on Keanu Bacchus, Scott McDonald, Tate Russell, and Kwame Yeboah. And then, so the 75th minute after Scott McDonald scores, it's Trent Bahaja and Anthony Caceres for Costa and Bam Johan. Now, we know Caceres had a knock midweek that was revealed after the game, which is why he's only played 15 minutes plus stoppage time here. He's waited too long. It's too long to be waiting until the 75th minute. Your opposing coach has made 4 subs, and the fact that you also only make 3 subs shows to me that Corica is playing way too reactively. And this is not a new thing. He's reactively, he's waiting to use the bench. I don't think Corica trusts his bench, and that's a problem. If you don't trust your bench, then why have some of these players there? If you don't trust them to go out and either close out a game or get the points need or get the goals needed to shore up a draw. Like you've got, and I'm going to go back to the youth here: Ivanovic, Wood, Swibble. You have these players available to you, and they're looking good when they're playing for the Sydney Youth in the NPL. Corica doesn't trust them against A-League level competition for whatever reason. So why have them on the bench? Why not? And I know the salary cap's a little bit of an issue, and I know LaFondra's coming back, which will ease some of those concerns. But there's no reason that you couldn't, say, loan these players out somewhere else and get different players in. If you don't trust these players, you see a future in them, but you don't trust them to do a job for you right now, loan these players out, get them game time elsewhere, bring in talent that will serve exactly what you want from your bench so that you can get a draw in this derby. Like Sydney did excellently late. If Caceres, if that goes in on the underside of the crossbar, this is 3-3. We're having a completely different discussion of this game. As it was, it hit the middle of the crossbar. There's just ways that Corica could be going about this. As I said, I think Corica needs to win silverware this season. And even then, if he wins silverware, I still think it needs to be, the discussion may need to be had, because otherwise, and I've seen other people talk about this, and I know soccer Twitter is not the be-all to end-all, but this has the feelings of what is looking like the start of a Melbourne Victory-esque decline, where a grand final win here might just paper over some of the cracks that are starting to appearing. I don't know what the solution would be from a coaching perspective for Sydney to go out and do something else. I don't have those answers yet. I mean, in jest, I would have suggested Mourinho had he not signed with Roma this morning, and not that Mourinho would come to Australia, but I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way. What do you think, Shaun?
So I don't think it's necessarily a lack of trust in those players, to be completely honest, because I think at various points he has introduced them into games or he has started them and done whatever else. I just think he's bad at this portion of management. That's my honest opinion. I just don't think he's a good game manager. I think like the fascinating one was the other week when he spent 5.5 minutes blowing up at Bozza on the sideline, like not during an interview, just like getting upset with him about a decision like it had anything to do with what Mark Buzzin just said, other than one, we shouldn't have reporters and broadcast people on the sideline able to talk to referee like officials during the season. I've never seen it anywhere else in the world. And then at the other point as well is like I think Corica gets too easily rattled, and sometimes maybe that's a good thing, but then at other times, like there's a stubbornness that comes with that, and I think generally he just lost track of time. Like I do think that happens. Like what was Patrick Wood going to do with 3 minutes? There was so little to be done at that time for him as a player to try and really contribute, and I don't think that was as astute a change as possible, given that Western Sydney weren't leaving their 18-yard box. So like, what's good bringing on Bahaja and Wood in that scenario where you're trying to break down 10 men, potentially like you'd want someone like Bratton out there instead because he can like play a good ball or do whatever else. Maybe Ivanovic is a better sub because ball defeat, he's arguably one of the better dribblers in the side and might beat a man in a 1v1 situation. I just think, I don't think it's necessarily a lack of trust, because I think Van der Sar, Ivanovic, Wood, King probably walk into most sides in the division, and I'd even include like potentially Melbourne City in that for a couple of those positions. So like they are arguably amongst like the top young talents in the division itself, and that's why they're going to be involved in all the setups and whatever else. So there is no, I think, additional quality out there and available to him. Obviously the other part as well is with the A-League registration, you've got to have X amount of scholarship players in that squad of 23. You've got to have an X amount of players under the age of 23. I think it's 8. And they've got really good talent coming through, and they've got talent that has been in that academy, like Cam Devlin, like Lokolai and Goy. I'm trying to think of other examples that aren't coming to me that have come through that Sydney FC. Yeah, Tilio have come through the Sydney FC academy that they've then moved on in the division and proven that they have that quality. So I don't necessarily think it's a lack of ability in those players, and I disagree with the portion about the Melbourne Victory stuff, because they are getting their training base and they are working in that partnership with Macquarie University. Where I think the challenge is going to come from, every season that it goes on with this group together, and this group deserves respect and they deserve to be kept together as long as possible. They are arguably the longest dynasty of any of the A-League sides throughout the course of the history of the competition. That Brisbane side was torn apart in 2 years. Very few sides kept their same 11 year to year in grand finals, including Central Coast and all that sort of stuff. So I think they deserve credit for that, for keeping that group together. But at a certain point, you do run the risk of, you may potentially lose Bobo, Lafondra, Wilkinson and Bomyahan all at once, just because of their age. They are 35, 36. You're going to lose Ninkovic at some point. Who replaces Ninkovic in that squad? Ivanovic? He's not, like, that's too much pressure to put on a kid. So yeah, I think they do have to start working through a succession plan, but they've got that quality there to do it. So for me, it's more about Corica improving in the game management perspective and being brave enough to make decisions earlier. They were down for most of this match, so I'm not sure why it took... There wasn't any particular thing that happened in the 75th minute that he thought, I need to get 2 subs on there right now. So he could have made subs at half-time.
Sorry, just cut you off. I think unless the Scott McDonald goal kind of changed that, but if I recall from the TV broadcast correctly, I recall Bosnich saying to the commentary box that these players are ready to come on and they're just waiting for the next stoppage in play. It just so happened the next stoppage in play was the McDonald goal, so I don't know whether or not that played into it.
But even then, and I know this is one of the things that we spoke about before the game, like he changed Caceres for Bomyohan, like-for-like player swap, and he changed Bahaja for Barbarouses, like-for-like player swap. They didn't throw any different questions, they just threw different players. And I think that's the challenge as well. Like, you need to have plans A, B, C, whatever else. And Sydney FC have been fantastic. I think they are still going to finish top 2. I think they're going to get ACL, and I think that's going to be enough for them this season. And then next season, potentially with Lafondra back in for a full year, maybe then they start talking about, getting back into that Premier's Plate discussion. The final portion that, you'd want to kind of see them develop over the next few weeks is what does that plan B look like? If they're going into, they're not going to be that upset with this result, but like, let's be clear, you might be upset with it on the day. The fans and support might be upset that they can't seem to beat Western Sydney. But I was a Melbourne Heart fan for years, and we were shit every week except for the weeks we played Melbourne Victory. So derbies kind of go out the window. I think this was Western Sydney's grand final effectively, and Western Sydney, I think, are still unlikely to make finals. That's my honest opinion. The Sydney FC side, I think, will look at the last few weeks and they'll be disappointed that they haven't picked up 3 points somewhere, but they'll look at a hard-fought away victory at Central Coast. They'll look at a hard-fought victory against Adelaide United where they were down, and they will look at, potentially this game could have been 3-3 if not for a missed penalty as being a relatively successful run in a tough run of fixtures, and they'll look at their last few games coming home and be relatively happy with how that goes.
In terms of Corica, though, I posed this to you just quickly before we went to air because it's something I only thought of this morning. Is this the week that Corica should be trying something new? We don't know what the status of Caceres is. Again, the only reason he played 15 minutes in the derby was because of a midweek knock. You've got Bratton out due to yellow card accumulation. So essentially you're looking at Paulo Retre and Harry van der Sar as your two number sixes, with Nieuwenhof also out with a back injury, and that's essentially Nieuwenhof's season's done, barring maybe a grand final appearance, depending on how late Sydney go. I think that this is the week against a lowly Newcastle side that maybe you start to look at a formation change. But that all depends on Caceres. If Caceres is fit, he's going to slot into that number 6 role, and nothing will change. I put forward a 4-3-3 as a suggestion. So Redders stays. The back four stays the same. I think you go with Harry van der Sar or Retre as a number 6, and I've leaned towards van der Sar just because Paulo Retre still looks like he's a red card waiting to happen every week. I have Johan and Ninkovic as your two number 10s, playing more centrally than I do. They're still up the pitch, so they're still attacking midfielders, but more centrally as opposed to a little bit out towards the wings where they play at the moment. I've then got a front three, two wingers coming into a central striker. I've got Bahaja on the left, Barbarousse is on the right, and I think either Bobo or Patrick Wood, and I'm leaning towards Patrick Wood just to get some game time in and give Bobo a little bit more of a rest, maybe come in 60, 70 minutes into this game. Maybe Bobo doesn't even come in. Maybe it's Ivanovic that comes in or something like that. Geordie Swivel, just to kind of reset things, because this is the week to experiment. And it all depends on Anthony Caceres. If Caceres is out or starts on the bench, I think this is the week that maybe Corica could start to experiment and see, okay, we have a plan B now that we see works against A-League competition. Even if it is against Newcastle, that's still A-League level competition. What do you think on that?
Look, I don't... To be honest, for me, I just think they need something different that becomes what they want to do in the last 15 minutes of the game. So I don't, as much as we want to kind of talk and speculate, and the football manager in me loves kind of throwing together different formations and lineups and stuff, I don't think they're ever going to change. But what I would love to see is, we've seen in the league over the last kind of 2-3 seasons, the idea of like a free role player that just gets to go wherever they want, isn't really playing a position. Diamante's obviously the archetype for that at Western United. Where does he play in their formation? Wherever the fuck he wants. Where does Castro play? They say that he's a winger, but in reality, he just moves wherever he feels like moving in that final third. Sometimes on the left, sometimes on the right. He's played through the middle. He goes wherever he wants to, such as his quality and ability. What I would like to see, and I think Western Sydney actually did this well against Sydney FC on the weekend, is them to just kind of move Ninkovic more centrally into like a classic number 10, but then tell him, go wherever you want. Who cares? And then go to maybe one player up front, and it might be Bobo, given Corica's faith in him. Barbarousse might move out to the right-hand side. Johan might come off. Then you get an Ivanovic in a wide area. You get a Patrick Wood playing as maybe like an inside forward on the left-hand side. Go to more of a 4-2-3-1 style, and then really try and unlock defences by allowing your most creative players to get on the ball in different areas to what they're used to. I think Ninkovic, while fantastic, and for me, still Sydney FC's best player, I think you are kind of shackling him to that left wing a little bit, where everybody knows now he's going to get the ball to feet and he's not going to turn and sprint past everybody because he's 36 now, but his touching quality is so good that he's going to start making like kind of diagonal movements or lateral movements to try and play quick 1-2s and get in around the box, and his feet are good enough that if you do try and jump in on him, he'll get around you. So like put him in the middle, like get him back on the ball and possession around the edge of an area, and get runners outside him, get Bobo in the box to try and pick up balls, get Wood and Barbarouses trying to stretch the defensive line and give you a bit more width in wide areas for angled balls. Then you can get Ryan Grant and Joel King making second phase runs and him try and pick them out. Like, I would just like to see them try something different in terms of their shape and their structure that isn't just changing players around. And I think even dropping that one forward to more of a number 10 position and making it Ninkovic would provide something different that a defense then has to deal with, and a different question that defense has to answer. And I think that's the challenge. Like, City, for me, and the parts that I've enjoyed this season, is that they won't necessarily play let's say they take Jamie McLaren off, and they have done this quite a few times throughout the season. It'll be like Sabaki, Tilio, Kolakovsky, whoever else will come on as a front three, and they'll rotate who that striker is in different phases of play. Sometimes it'll be Kolakovsky, sometimes Tilio, sometimes Sabaki. They don't go like for like replacements. They kind of go to a fluid front three that's really designed on a high press, and then once they've won that press, like how quickly can we run at goal? So it's very direct in possession. And I've enjoyed that portion because we then have the ability, which we did against Victory twice, to score 4 or 5 goals in the last 15 minutes of a game, because fresh legs are playing in a different style and structure, and they're presenting a different scenario and a different question for the defensive unit to try and answer in the late stages of a game. Does it sometimes cause us issues going the other direction? Yeah, it does. But, you know, like, we can kind of make that transition, and we do make better use of the full depth of the squad. And Sydney FC, I think, needs to learn how to do the same thing. That's in their challenge this season. You want to talk about Lafondro. Lafondro's signing is to design so that in games like this one, you score that penalty. Or in games like this one, when you go 2-0 down, you pull one back in the first minute, or like the first 5 minutes after that, because you've got a half chance and he's that good that he finishes it because he's an excellent finisher. I don't think it papers over the scenario, which is that everybody knows now 5 years down the track how Sydney FC is going to set up and play from the Arnold era, how Corica has taken the exact same style and basically like copy pasted it across, and you know what you're going to expect. I think Sydney FC, as good as they are and as much as I think they are still one of the best two sides in the division, are very easy to read. You know what you're getting with them. You know what sort of performance they're going to offer. You know where their danger areas are. And if you can match them for 90 minutes, you can potentially like kind of negate a lot of the positive impact they have.
Yeah, one of the things that worked in Sydney's favour, at least last season anyway, is you knew how they were setting up. The problem is that the quality of talent was so good, because you got to remember Ninkovic was a year younger at that point. Lafondra was a year young. Like, so all these players were a year younger, and so they still had all that talent, and they still had a little bit of youth. I'm going to use the term youth loosely here, but they weren't as old as they were now, so they still had a little bit more energy to go with it, so you just couldn't stop it, even though you knew exactly what was coming. I'm moving on now to our next game, because I think I've said enough on this, and we've probably spent 25 minutes on that game. Given that we have a clock to keep us down, should have been the case. But anyway, Mariners failed to win again after taking an early lead. They only have one victory in their last 9 games now. 1 win, 3 losses, 5 draws. Victory also starts to create a little bit of space between them and Newcastle at the bottom of the table now. Given their win over the Wanderers, a point here, you'd expect a couple more points. Like, I guess, are Newcastle relegated to the wooden spoon at this point? And we'll talk more about that later. But what do the Mariners need to start doing? Because they only got 1 point from 6 this week. Matt Simon, 4 minutes in, negated by Callum McManaman in the 62nd minute. If Rudy just plays that header a little bit better, you're potentially looking at a loss here for the Central Coast, I think. And I know this one caused a little bit of controversy. You know, Brenton Speed leading the charge on this one in commentary. That should have been considered a goal, but the fact of the matter is that he's taken the defender out. You stopped that, regardless of whether or not Kai Rouse was going to get to that ball. The fact of the matter is that you put your shoulders on the defender and you push them down even half an inch. Like, that's taking out a defender. If the situations were reversed and this is taking place in the Mariners attacking box at the other end of the field from the same corner, and Rudy Justette is pushing down on Kai Rouse to stop him from leaping up to score a goal, everyone, and I include Brenton Speed in this because he has done something similar before, would have been screaming for a penalty to be given to Kai Rouse. So what, you can't have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, it's the fact that this goal is correctly ruled out, and so it allows Central Coast to escape at the point here. What do Central Coast need to do going forward? And I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but what do they need to do going forward to make sure they maintain themselves in that top six?
Look, they're not doing that much wrong. The biggest challenge, so when we went through and did our like preseason previews and all that sort of stuff, and like there's a reason that Central Coast Mariners were treated as a fairy tale, and it's because so much of their squad is unheralded players that we've never heard of, or youngsters that haven't come through like elite level academies. They've just kind of been picked and plucked from different NPL competitions. Like Jaden Casella, was at Rockdale Illingdon last season. Matt Hatch is a local boy from the Central Coast. So like they're not pulling from the same places and the same recruitment locations that like Sydney FC is or Melbourne Victory is or wherever else. They are a regional side, which isn't that far north of Sydney, I guess, but like is still looked at as being one of the lower recruitment areas and one of the lower catchments as far as the league is concerned. So we kind of all, I think, knew and forget at certain points that Central Coast's depth is not equivalent to and the same as the depth of a lot of the other teams in and around the division. The portion that I think they're going to be not guided by, but at least happy with, is that they've still got players to come back into that lineup that I think are going to offer them quite a bit. Like, hopefully, fingers crossed, because I think it's the right thing to do, they get Urena back into that starting lineup and they can start getting, I thought they had a really good period, and this is a terrible thing to say, when Gianni Stensness was out of the side, where they were playing some really good football with Bozanic and Nisbet in midfield, and they've gotten away from that a little bit because they're trying to fit Stensness, Nisbet and Bozanic in that midfield structure as their best starting 11, which is, it's fair. Like, I would be doing the exact same thing in that scenario, but I think you can kind of look at the subs that they're bringing on throughout the course of a game and trying to change matches, and you can see quite quickly that they don't necessarily have the depth, even compared to Melbourne Victory. Like, compare the subs that they brought on, which were Matthew Hatch, Lewis Miller, Dan Bauman, who's I rate quite highly, and Jordan Smiley. All players that are less than probably 20 appearances in the league, whereas Melbourne Victory only made 2 subs, but they brought on Elvis Camsoba, who, better or worse, has a bunch of appearances in the division, Brandon Lawton, who a lot of people have raved about, and then the rest of their bench was made up of academy prospects Aaron Anderson, Jay Barnett, Burkhard Kadar, Louis Laurie Latanzio. So all players that are fulfilling that role of being a young player in that squad and division. I don't think Central Coast should panic yet, because we know that their 11 is good, but their 15's not. And at the moment, they're having to utilise that 15 a lot more than I think they'd prefer to. The best part that they've got coming up is that they are still going to play Newcastle twice. And that's really, I think, going to help them quite a bit. So we did mention it earlier with the other game. I don't think they'll panic. I think Melbourne Victory still weren't the better side in this game. I thought Central Coast were better. They just didn't create enough Gil's Head chances or finish enough Gil's Head chances. But once they get Urena back in that lineup, once they settle on a starting 11 structure, and if they can get everybody fit for the final series, I think Central Coast will right the ship, and I think they will still make that top 6.
We'll move on now to the ladder. So it is Newcastle at the bottom on 13 points, Melbourne Victory in 11th on 15 points, Perth Glory 19 points. We agreed a couple of weeks ago that we're writing these teams out of finals contention, and I don't think anything's changed in the last few weeks there. Do you want to maybe try to change that pen line to a pencil line for Glory, or do you think their season's done still?
I still think they're done, to be honest. Look, I think Newcastle and Victory still have something to play for, which is neither of them want the wooden spoon. And despite Victory having better performances in the last few weeks, they are still only 2 points above Newcastle, 1 game effectively. And I don't know necessarily where Newcastle are going to pick up points in their last 6 games, because they're not playing each other. So they've got like Sydney FC, Central Coast, Brisbane, City, Central Coast again, and Perth Glory at home at a date to be confirmed. Like, realistically, how many of those games are they actually going to get 3 points in? Not that many. So I don't think they've got much to play for. I don't think Melbourne Victory have got much to play for other than pride, and potentially looking at Perth as someone maybe they'll try and catch, just that 4-point buffer at the moment. I still don't count Perth Glory. I don't think they've got enough time, and I don't think they've got enough versatility in the way that they're playing to really go on and make a decent fist and make a decent crack of finishing in those top 6 spots. And I think even though they've got some great players, and they've got players that I think could do really well, like could get into top 6 sides, they don't have a fluidity to them, and they don't have an entire 11 that boasts great players like that. I think they've got 2 good fullbacks. The centre-backs are a bit sketchy. The goalkeeper's a bit sketchy. Central midfield, Kilkenny's good, but getting older. No one alongside him. I rate that highly. They're wide players that I think they were arguably playing better football when they had Armiento and Steins in those wide positions, and I think they've actually lost a little bit with Castro and Economides coming back in up front. They're going to play Fornaroli and Keogh, and Diego Estino's just disappeared again, like as he does every season. He gets a couple of glimpses here, there, and everywhere at the start of the year, and then kind of goes away. Kieran Bramwell, they've been playing as a 17-year-old player, so I'm not sure how that bodes for him, but he's probably injured, and I don't know about it. But yeah, I'd put the line through Perth, and we're penciling this week Wellington Phoenix as well, because they're just running out of time. Like that's the big one for me. They've only got 6 games to go, and so many teams around them still have games in hand. And I know they're only 1 win outside the top 6, but I just kind of look at Western United, and now I think we have to have a conversation about Brisbane Roar as well, as having games in hand and at the moment playing a more expansive brand of football. But the big triumph for Wellington will be getting to play those games at home this year, because that's not something that I think they were expecting at any point. And there are positives for them, and I think the other benefit as well is that they've got a squad that they've got mostly signed for next season, with Davia being the exception. If they get him back on board again, then they'll still look, I think, at this season as being relatively successful, given all the challenges they've had.
Yeah, so moving into the top 75% of the table now, only 9 points separating the 9th place Wellington Phoenix and top of the table Melbourne City. Shows just how close this season actually is. There hasn't been that runaway leader like there has been over the last few seasons. So Wellington Phoenix 26 points in 9th, Brisbane Roar 27 points in 8th, but only 17 games played, so plenty of games in hand there. Western Sydney just outside the top 6 on 28 points, which is only goal differential over Western United. Western United in that 6th spot, also 28 points. MacArthur, 29 points in 5th place, but they do have 20 games played as well, so running out of time there, particularly if teams like Western United and Brisbane Roar can get on a roll there. Could very well see MacArthur slip out of that 6. Adelaide United, 4th spot, 31 points. Sydney FC, 3rd spot, 31 points as well. Goal differential playing a role there. Central Coast, 2nd place, 32 points, and Melbourne City at the top of the 3-point gap with 35 points. So you want to put a pencil line through Wellington Phoenix. I'm not there yet. I want to see how they play this week before I do that, because I still want to back them into the 6. I wanted to put the line through Western Sydney last week because they lost the victory, a victory side in shambles. And yet, then they come out and do that in the derby. They still have a derby to go towards the end of the month. Yeah, I think I'm going to put a pencil line through them as well, just because of the games played. So I think I want to back the Phoenix in, because I think they have more to offer than what Western Sydney does, and I don't think you can discount those New Zealand games as an intangible that could change things. What do you think on that?
I back Western United and Brisbane at the moment, and the reason I say that is don't look necessarily at the points and the games played and all that sort of stuff. Look at the last 5 fixtures.
Yeah,
MacArthur, no wins in their last 6. For me, Western Sydney had no wins in their last 7 or 8 prior to the win at the weekend. I'm not sure if they turn a corner and win on the weekend, like then maybe we do have a conversation that they've kind of figured it back out again and they're back winning games like they were in the early part of the season. And then at the same time, again, like Central Coast haven't won in their last 6 either. So I think perhaps a more accurate reflection of their current form and their current run of games is that last 5, and who is in good form and who's winning matches and who's picking up maximum points at the moment. And I think that helps us kind of drive who are the teams that are in better form and that are going to make the most of their games in hand. And I think for Western United, 1 defeat in their last 6, 3 wins, 2 draws. And Brisbane, who've now got 3 wins in their last 5, those are better runs of form heading into key and critical parts of the season when they're playing catch-up games that I think they are going to get above a MacArthur and above a Western Sydney Wanderers. And for me, both those sides are slipping in terms of their current form and their current playing potential and ability and all that sort of stuff. So that's where my head's at right now. So I've got a line through Wellington. I'm happy to be proven wrong. I'd love for the Knicks to get in there and kind of make the most of that'd be a fairy tale season as well, I think, for them as well, given that all the challenges they've gone being in Wollongong this year. I do think it's more likely that Brisbane do it, given their depth and I think their playing some all right football at the moment. And I think Western United, as we spoke about in their match, I think they're just hard to beat. I don't think they're going to set the world on fire. I don't see them going deep in a final series. I just think they're hard to break down. And I think that's where they provide a different sort of challenge, where, as you mentioned, are they the best side are they the best side parking the bus with 10 men? Potentially, and they're also one of the best sides, I think, in terms of the stability of their defensive structure. And as much as we hate noted stalker and bully Mark Redan, he knows how to coach a successful defensive structure. That's the one credit you give him. And then he's got Diamanti, who can really do anything against any side in the division. So yeah, I think there's some challenges there, but again, for me, 5th down to maybe 9th, if you want to keep Wellington in it, is still wide open. And, we'll probably have an entirely different conversation in a week's time, such as the differential between individual results week to week and how tight that points gap actually is.
Yeah, I think that's, as you said, it's still wide open, and I think we're going to set ourselves for an amazing final month of football, especially since we don't know how Socceroo absences will have an impact on that. We'll move on now to our only headline of the week. Shaun has gone with the tagline of Apocalypse Now. I actually like that. It's a good one. As Tony, just after we recorded last week, Tony Popovic was announced as the new coach at the Melbourne Victory. The board coming out and saying that he will be given free rein to go and sign whoever he wants. So essentially a blank checkbook, as long as it fits in with the salary cap requirements. We know he's going to sign his 2 sons, so I don't think that will come as a shock to anyone. In fact, I think it'd be more of a shock if he doesn't sign both his kids. He did take a bunch of players over to Greece with him. How many of them come back and play? Maybe a Paul Izzo, Josh Balante. How many of them does he bring with him to the Victory? Do they want to come back to Australia? You've also got, as we were recording this, an article that came out from Joey Lynch for ESPN Australia and New Zealand that Steve Keane has come out and slammed Tony Popovic for the fact that he's reportedly told certain players that they're free to leave at the end of the season because they're not going to be offered contracts. The issue from Steve Keane is that Steve Keane has not been told. It's just Tony Popovic and the board going about it, and no one's told the current coach. Based on laws, rules, regulations, you can't stop coaches telling players, you're not going to be offered a contract, go sort your future out. I think there has to be a kind of a rule of thumb here where it's look, you're the incoming coach, that's fine. At least tell the current coach, even if it's only in the caretaker role, why he may have demotivated players towards the end of the season. What are your thoughts on that?
I kind of disagree. Shout out to any Black and Rovers fans, but Steve Keane, I don't think he's that successful a manager. And I think earlier on, or late last week, he was talking about the positive impacts at Melbourne Victory, and they're still not playing a great brand of football. They haven't lost as 7-0, and that's the progress that they've made. But they've picked up 7 points out of the last 5, which is the most points I think they've gotten in a 5-game period, which is fine. But we talk about, and this is a global football thing, not an A-League thing, but that new manager bounce where just by having a new face and a new person running the trainings each day or picking the team, whatever else, can lift players and can kind of get improved performances out of them. And let's be honest, there wasn't anywhere for Victory to go other than up. They weren't going to get worse because they couldn't. That just wasn't going to be likely at any point. 48 goals conceded this season is historically bad. And the season's still got 6 games to go for them, or 7 games to go, apologies. So I think there's part of it. Steve Keane just wants to be looked at as a victim in this scenario, where I think he wants everyone to look at it and say, oh, he did a wonderful job, so harsh that he's not been given out. And Brent Speed will probably say that on the weekend because he's a shill. But so I think there's that aspect to it where is Steve Keane providing the most transparent thing possible? In that fantastic article by Joey Lynch, and we'll try and share that one on Twitter as well, he says that it's only one player's actually been contacted by Popovic, whereas the article kind of leads that has this happened with 100 players? No. At the same time, if you've got a player that you're not re-signing next season and they're in the last 6 months of their contract, you kind of owe them the benefit of telling them that their contract's not getting renewed so that they can sign pre-contract terms with their next employer, or that they know with the remaining 6 months to go, they don't have a contract for next season. So they really need to start putting themselves in the shop window for either other teams in the division or other teams internationally. It would be much more difficult, I think, if you waited until after 26 games and then told those players you're actually not getting a contract and your contract's up in 6 weeks' time. Like, I think there's two elements to it. And what we don't know, like, there's no comment from Tony Popovich. Steve Keane has told us this, and maybe it is the chairman doing it, and the chairman hasn't necessarily done the greatest job by the Victory over the last few years. So I think there's a few different layers to this that perhaps we're not seeing and not getting that might relate to that more. On the Popovich appointment specifically, I think it is a good one for Victory. I don't think there were that many coaches out there globally that are going to look at them as being realistically a club that they can get anymore unless they pay an insane amount of money. Like, they're not going to get a world-beating team. They will get Tony Popovich. He will have a good 12 months and then he will probably leave 6 months after that. That is the cycle that we're in at the moment between Western Sydney and Perth and now probably Victory as well. The 3-year deal portion is interesting. As you touched upon, the Xanthi players, like I think German and Brillante have played the most games, but Paul Izzo hasn't played that much. Callan Elliott hasn't played that much. His kids haven't played that much. So is there going to be those players leaving at the end of their contracts? We don't quite know yet. I don't think from an appointment perspective, and I'm happy for Victory fans to disagree on Twitter or like hit us up in the comment section below, I don't think the issue is that they need an open checkbook, because I'm sure Jacob Butterfield is getting paid good money. I'm sure Callum McManaman is getting paid good money. I'm sure Ryan Shotton is as well. I don't think that, and I'm sure Robbie Cruz is at the same time. I'm sure Marco Rojas is. I'm sure they've got quite a few players in that squad that are earning decent money, like Traore, whoever else as well. So I don't think that's the concern. This hasn't resolved the issue as to how Victory has fallen so far behind the rest of the clubs in the division, which is they don't have an elite training facility and they don't have a stable academy structure. They have NPL sides, yes, but where do they train? All over the place, all over the different suburbs. They need that elite training facility. They need that elite training structure. And only if they get that and sign it will they start making those steps towards what they want. Popovich is going to come in. He's going to do what he did at Western Sydney. He's going to do what he did at Perth, where he will build a really good championship squad for a season. But he's not a long-term manager. He's not going to build towards a long-term academy structure. He's not going to blood young players. Like, there's no one at Western Sydney that is a Popovich player that came through there as a young player that he blooded into first-team football that is now an elite A-League player or that is now a stable A-League player. Same with Perth. Most of the squad that he had and won the championship with, Davidson, Sporanovic, was it Kovic then or was it Reddy? I can't remember. A few of the other players as well, they've left. They've moved on or they are 3 years older. So, Castro isn't the same player anymore. Kerr's not the same player. Kilkenny's not the same player anymore. He hasn't left a dynasty and set something up that is going to be long-term. So I don't know if a lot of the issues and a lot of the things that Victory want, which is like a Sydney FC style period of established dominance or a Melbourne City style elite level coaching and academy facility in Australia, this doesn't give them that. And I don't think he's a coach that's going to be working towards that. So I have a feeling that it's really a big name to try and placate the fan base and get them some short-term success. But unless they can get that academy structure, unless they get those training facilities, they are still, I feel, on the decline overall as an overall football team is concerned.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. So as you mentioned, 3-year contract. Since Muscat left, this is now their 4th full-time coach. It's a 3-year deal. I should say 4th full-time coach. So that's in 2 years. So that's an average one every 6 months. It is the 3-year contract. How long does it take Popovich to turn this around? Because 3-year contract, we know that if a European club comes calling, he's going because that's where he thinks his future is, and that's fine. But you've got the fact that this is a club in turmoil. This isn't an overnight fix. I know that the A-League is incredibly volatile in terms of where teams will finish one season. The exception of that has been until this season. It was the Central Coast. It was Newcastle. They've been around the bottom the last couple of years. Like, does Popovich have 2 years to turn this around? Like, is it next year, okay, we're going to set the building blocks. We might just sneak into the 6th. We might just be on the outside. And then that second year, it's you have to be winning this or else, your 3rd year, you're free to go elsewhere if you want.
I think he could do it in 12 months because I think their defensive structures are... he's a defensive manager. He's not a free-flowing attacking football like Raw Salona. We're going to outplay everybody type of manager. They are defensively sound and they are industrious. They work incredibly hard. Those are the hallmarks of his sides, both in Perth, where he kind of developed that back three that he plays with, now, and then the original Western Sydney side, which was more of a 4-2-3-1, but was incredibly hardworking. He's, I think, the best placed Australian manager to win the Champions League because he manages in that defensive solidity and structural style. That's just the reality of the situation. So I think he can get Victory back into the top 6 conversation, potentially Premier's Plate conversation very quickly. It wouldn't shock me. I don't know if he's retired or not. It was on Twitter this week, but Matt Spranovich hasn't played for anyone since Perth Glory when Popovich left. And if you follow his Instagram,
I believe Spranovich quietly retired after moving.
But he's still only 32, and he's back in Melbourne, and he's having coffees on his Instagram every week. Tomislav Masella hasn't had a club since he left Perth Glory, as far as I'm aware. He's still only like 31, 32, has a long pedigree. Potentially Matt German comes back. Potentially Brillante comes back. Callan Elliott comes back. You drop those players into this Victory side, and immediately it's a much better team instantaneously. They need a right back, they need a goalkeeper, they need all that sort of stuff. But then you've got international signings, like are they going to keep McManaman? Are they going to keep Butterfield? Are they going to keep Justed? I don't think Justed stays. I think maybe the other two do. Once you get those guys in and you start with a full preseason to work those defensive structures, get them up to date, play a little bit deeper, and then really try and get the best out of like Rojas and Cruz and whoever else going forward, then like that's pretty straightforward. Dylan Ryan's going to leave. He's going to go back to his Willem Tway parent club. He's only on loan. Ben Falami's going to leave. He's only on loan from Ipswich. Like they've already got spots and gaps opening up. So I don't think it's going to be that big a stretch for him to turn them around. And I'm sure we'll hear, actually, you know what, we won't, because it's not fucking Fox Sports. We will hear next season about how great a job he's done about taking them from 11th back into top 6 discussions. But if he's got a blank checkbook, you can do quite a bit just spending that money to get a good 11 or get a good 15. So, yeah, I think he can turn them around relatively quickly, but I would urge all Victory fans not to lose sight of what's caused this issue and what's caused this problem, which is a slow degradation and deprecation of the club's value and the being left behind in terms of the overall structures of a club. You're not just an A-League team. You are a football club. So you need to have successful W-League sides, NPL sides, academy structures if you want that long-term view and that long-term success. And I don't think Popovich's appointment immediately resolves all those issues. I think they're still outstanding.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that either. It'll be interesting to see how this turns it around. I think they're still going to miss the 6 next season just because I think there's too many problems there for the Victory. You know, we've touched on the off the field stuff, the training base, everything like that. Essentially you can see a full squad overhaul, but even then it might take time to bring them together. We know that Popovich is incredibly demanding as a coach, so maybe he gets the best out of everyone at the Victory. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. So yeah, I think that's all that can be said on that for now without knowing exactly what's going to happen next season. So that will do us for this week here on the Weekend Recap. As always, I'm Steven Poletti. You can follow me on Twitter at PolettiSteven. You can follow the Reserve Team on Twitter at ReserveTeamAU. Check us out at thereserveteam.com.au. You can follow Shaun on Twitter at InTheMixer_FM, and you can check him out on YouTube at looking up channel In The Mixer. Still in the midst of that Pentagon Challenge. Is episode 22 at the moment?
I think so. 23 later this week. We'll see.
As he still aims for his first trophy in that challenge in Asia. So thank you very much for joining us all this week. As always, follow us on Twitter. Stay tuned to the website for the amazing content we produce, and we will see you next time.